as a species and as business leaders struggle with intractable challenges that could actually be resolved. Why? Disruption continues to surprise us, even when we prepare. Why? And 30 years into our pursuit of the metaverse, why are we still struggling to make it work? It's because our model of the world doesn't match the reality of the world. For 1 billion years, fungi have been evolving a globally pervasive ecosystem that connects countless trees and plants and microbes and many other species together, including humans. In other words, we as land mammals are participants in the billion-year-old ecosystems that fungi have built. Now, we don't think of ourselves this way. We don't think of humans essentially as participants in ecosystems, or even as being all that deeply connected to the people and things that surround us, living or otherwise. But we're on the verge of a profound paradigm shift. For the past 100 years or so, we humans have been discovering connectedness in all sorts of surprising places. In 1935, Albert Einstein co-published a paper in which he mathematically demonstrated that two particles can literally be anywhere in the universe, and yet instantly and causally influence each other's behavior. He famously called this spooky action at a distance, and seems to have been rather disturbed by the finding. I mean, Einstein shared our current common sense that separate things, separated by large distances, can't be connected in this kind of precise and intimate way. And yet within a few decades, there was experimental proof of this phenomenon that we now know as quantum entanglement. Not many years later, biologists, building on an understanding of bacterial and viral activity in the human body, began to learn that while some of these microbes are detrimental and cause disease, a stunning volume and diversity of microbes lives in and on our bodies that turn out to be essential to our health and function. In fact, about 10 times as many cells are genetically not you as those that are you. And these comprise the human microbiome. Back in 1998, I was at a conference in Amsterdam, and the speaker stunned me into rapt 20-something attention when he said from the stage, "I who am speaking to you am the elected representative of a microbial community that is my embodiment here." Right? This speaker was the now legendary expert, fungi expert, Paul Stamets, whose wildly successful 2008 TED Talk accelerated mainstream awareness of many dimensions of connectedness. You've probably heard of mycelium, the branching root structure that is the essence of soil-based fungi. Mycelium is so deeply connected with trees and other organisms in the forest that it is often interwoven at the molecular level. And this alignment enables delivery of nutrition and conveyance of waste, as well as communication in such diverse and nuanced ways that mycelium is often compared to the internet, as well as to our biologically based neural networks, the structure and function of our human brains. Mycelium is like the microbiome of the forest. Later in the 20th century, we discovered ulcers and stress as connection between mind and body, and that we can leverage this connection intentionally and bidirectionally to create calm, elation, all kinds of other states via meditation and yoga, cardio training, huge variety of consumable plants and other substances, and it seems like we're just scratching the surface of these possibilities. So in addition to quantum entanglement, the human microbiome, mind and body, mycelium and trees, we could talk about many other surprising discoveries of connectedness over the past 100 years. But this is an abbreviated version of this talk. You get it, you're with me. We don't need more examples. You may even feel it. Everything is connected, and yet we're surprised. And sometimes, like Einstein, even disturbed by the way things are connected. Why? Let's do a little experiment. Bring to mind any of the moments that parents have with their infant children, that you've had, if you have kids. When we're speaking words, what are we saying? Daddy, mommy, chair, TV, doggy, truck, and so on. From the earliest moments of human interaction, we train our kids to see the world as a bunch of named things, each of which is distinct from other things. As we grow and start interacting with other children, our parents continuously and firmly intervene to clarify that we can't do and take whatever we want, that other people and their things are not ours and not us. And this training continues as we grow to learn about all the us's and them's in the world. As Seth Godin likes to say, people like us do things like this. In my own conservative Christian upbringing, I learned about believers and non-believers, conservatives and liberals, Americans and foreigners, ourselves and other races, a bit less well-defined, responsible and irresponsible people, good and bad, lots of other categorical distinctions. And thanks to my father, a PhD in economics, I absorbed an inclination to critical thinking, which I practiced in an instinctive and childlike way at first. As a kid, I experimented with a lot of things. I took apart household appliances and reassembled them to learn about how they worked. I made imaginary machines from found materials. I did the usual boy stuff with insects and bicycles and video games, and eventually got into computers and coding. And I very naturally loved the more formal lab-based experiments of secondary school that deepened my understanding of the scientific method and its essential focus on isolation of variables, keeping each distinct from the other so we're clear which does what. We've all learned this. This focus on distinction is foundational to critical thinking. The clear understanding of where responsibility lies, which discrete entities cause which outcomes, by which discrete actions. And your childhood may be different in some of the specifics, but I'll wager that you were also thoroughly indoctrinated in what I'll call the paradigm of distinction. The world is made up of discrete, distinct, separate things. That's what the world is. We're trained to see the world this way from infancy, and by the time we learn about externalities in business, about the importance of separating concerns and people and business units and ecological consequences, this paradigm is second nature. The paradigm of distinction is the air we breathe. It's our operating context. It's why we're surprised when we discover connectedness. And it's also what's limiting us as a species, preventing us from solving our greatest challenges, as well as keeping us from even imagining the symbiotic, thriving abundance that we and our businesses could realize. Consider, without the concept of race and racial distinctness, would any form of structural racism be possible? Without the notions of distinct religions and nations and ownership of land and other resources, would war be possible? Without the notion of externalities, those undesirable side effects of everyday business operations, would environmental pollution, huge increases in political polarization and loneliness and teen suicide, or countless other negative business impacts be possible, or at least societally acceptable? And I think perhaps most interesting, without the concept of nature defined as separate from us, would our failure to address climate change be possible? In her work on leverage points, systems thinker Donella Meadows categorizes and ranks the places in a system where a small shift can produce large and cascading changes. The most effective leverage point, she says, is the mindset or paradigm out of which the system, with all its goals, power structure, rules, and culture, arises. What if, instead of seeing the world as a bunch of named, distinct, separate things, we saw everything as connected, made up of nested ecosystems at every level? Assuming we did, could that be the key shift that would make all the difference? Connectedness is what's there when our programming in the paradigm of distinction is stripped away. If you spend time with babies, you know they experience undifferentiated connectedness. And in fact, it takes many years for the ego, the subjective experience of distinctness from others, to become fully formed, or we might say solidly programmed and deployed to production. Psychedelics and meditation practice and high-speed backroads motorcycling and sex and public speaking and flow state in general roll back our perception of being distinct. Because when we find ourselves in any of these altered states, a profound sense of connectedness seems to be the default. It's what's already there. So let's just say things in the world are way more connected than we realize, than our current paradigm and our language and our assumptions and behaviors acknowledge. So what? So what if we're on the verge of a thriving, abundant future? I mean, Peter Diamandis and many others are speaking passionately about the abundance that exponential technologies will produce in the near future. And while these technologies are truly promising, as long as we continue to operate inside the paradigm of distinction, it's hard to see how we'll collectively produce anything other than more of the same. More businesses producing more negative externalities, owned privately by more individuals, with the same kinds of distinct, separate lives. I believe the tipping point, the essential shift that will enable this thriving, abundant future is our awakening into active, intentional participation in all the nested ecosystems we already inhabit. This is what will make the metaverse work. And I don't mean just as a profitable business model or industry, although I do mean that. This will make the metaverse work holistically for humanity and for all living things on Earth, supporting and catalyzing our thriving, abundant future. I'm going to share 3 tools we can use to accelerate this awakening, specifically using the technologies and shared enthusiasms that draw us together today into this human ecosystem, tools that are foundational to the metaverse. Now, the first is decentralization. Now, granted, we've heard this word a lot, the past year especially, but I'd argue that so far we've just scratched the surface of its implications, and we'll see this in the coming few years. Now, decentralization can be thought of as distributed participation in a greater whole, the way living organisms do in their natural state. And in the digital world, there have been massive economic and efficiency benefits of the centralization of search and social media and e-commerce and entertainment delivery and device production and all the rest of it. And yet, as the last 15 years or so have shown us, the very nature of engagement maximizing centralization of everything digital is to disrupt our experience of connectedness with each other and even with ourselves. You know, as our communication becomes increasingly mediated by algorithms, and as our self-expression becomes performance for the algorithms, all of the emotional health and resilience and sense of belonging that we've traditionally received from connectedness and self-sovereignty is being eroded further and further. Now, so far, the guiding principles of distributed ownership and participation remain our best hope for creating an immersive world that embodies this self-sovereignty in balance with connectedness. I mean, democracy in its ideal form is decentralization. This is a decentralized, autonomous organization. Now, DAOs as we know them leverage blockchain technology to implement distributed participation, the way living organisms do in their natural state. Analogous to the ways, DAOs as we know them leverage blockchain technology to implement distributed participation. Yeah, analogous to the ways ecosystems of living things have evolved, states of equilibrium, and even symbiosis. The more we study mushroom mycelium and the ways it connects plants and organisms in forest ecosystems, the more we will discover patterns that help us consciously evolve collective behaviors that create ever greater health and capabilities at the level of the human and business and natural ecosystems we participate in. And we can practice building these patterns into the smart contracts of DAOs and work to evolve DAOs so they can operate at society scale, perhaps even humanity scale. This is biomimicry at the ecosystem level. Okay, so the second tool is presence. Now, we took physical presence for granted before the pandemic, of course, our whole lives. And now that people have been returning in recent months to stores in 2019 numbers and public spaces, here we all are, having invested substantial time and money to be physically present with each other. In 2016, I led emerging technology for global tech consultancy ThoughtWorks, and our lead designer hated video conferencing, never fully understood why, the extent of his disdain, but he would often say, "Video sucks. I bet we could do much better using VR." Challenge accepted, right? So our team's mission was to kick the tires on new and emerging interaction technologies. At the time, it was VR and AR, voice, chatbots, et cetera, and determine their value for ThoughtWorks enterprise clients across industries from airlines to financial services, retail, healthcare, and so on. So it was mid-2016. Like many of you, I think we were super excited to get our hands on HTC Vive, first Oculus Rift, Leap Motion for hand tracking, and so on. As we learned what the technology could do, we focused in on the team whiteboarding use case, because this is what we did every day. We knew loads of other professionals and colleagues did the same. So as we started prototyping, we did pretty well supporting drawing in 3 dimensions with our fingers, and we had embodied voice conversation from any 2 places on the planet. Our team was widely distributed around the world. But the surprising thing we stumbled into, by far the most profound thing, was that even though each of us looked like blue SpongeBob cartoons, we all had the same avatars, we felt like we were right next to each other, that we could feel each other's presence. Turns out the familiar voice and hand and arm gestures and movement was all that was needed to create this physiological sense of presence and connectedness with each other. And we'll eventually get photorealistic appearance and facial expressions, but it turns out we don't need these to feel presence. And the feeling of presence with other people creates the experience of connectedness much more than any existing social media can do. And the experience of being connected with other humans leads to looking out for each other, to creating space for diversity and self-expression, to operating more as an ecosystem. So decentralization, presence, and connectedness. Now, I've said this word a lot in this talk. We've said it a lot at this conference. It comes up a lot. It's worth taking a few moments to go a little deeper. This is a very rich term. We all remember big data, IoT, smart spaces. These terms are not on our lips at the moment, and yet the technology they represent continues to evolve and immerse itself more and more deeply into the infrastructure that powers our everyday lives. And these terms represent the digital-physical convergence. Of course, this decade, we're going to continue to see massive increases in this convergence. And this includes everything we're calling the metaverse, because if the metaverse means anything, it means connecting our physical embodiment to digital representations of physical spaces and objects. And as my close friend and collaborator Tony Parisi says, the metaverse is the internet, which is to say it is vast and complex and chaotic and distributed and made up of countless different UIs and apps on participants, and the one common element of everything internet is that it's all connected. And I would argue it's constantly evolving in push and pull with humanity and everything else in the world. And this evolution will continue to bring with it more and more sensing of our movement and behavior and integrate it into larger digital physical ecosystems that are increasingly useful and even beautiful. When I ran the first digital experience design team at global architecture firm Gensler, we focused on designing spaces that reflect and respond to the people that visit them, even connect with them in the best cases. And this can look like responsive artwork that brings a feeling of natural movement into a workplace like Microsoft's. It can look like merging the structure of a physical space with the digital content and experience of the space, as we did with Cadillac House in New York City. It can look like work we did for American fitness chain Planet Fitness, where we helped them go beyond gym-based workouts to connect with everyday moments in their customers' lives, to help them fulfill on their health and fitness goals. And connectedness can look like holistic digital physical ecosystems we designed for railcar leasing company GATX, where we helped their leadership see ways that they could outfit railcars with sensors that report on the condition of the freight in the car and the rail car itself to help predict maintenance and repair needs, as well as optimize capacity and transport routes in service of their customers' needs. So, brief overview, but decentralization, presence, and connectedness. Used as guiding principles in our design and development efforts, these are powerful lenses for unlocking unprecedented opportunities. Opportunities for evolving our businesses for greater resilience and disruption resistance, absolutely. And much more importantly, in the context of the world at large, these principles are essential for evolving our businesses and ourselves into greater alignment with all the ecosystems of the planet. Because as digital and physical converge, becoming expert in discovering and activating potential connections across all domains of our experience and our lives in the world becomes ever more important. And I don't just mean creating basic interactions between people and things, or even creating holistically integrated ecosystems for brands and businesses. We can empower each other to participate and contribute fully, to receive what we need and realize what we truly want. And we can take advantage of emerging and exponential technology to not only produce everything humanity needs at scale, but also do this by applying what Bruce Mal calls life-centered design, beyond human-centered design, because there is no thriving future for us until we return to a state of equilibrium with all the ecosystems of this planet. We know this. So let's try this on for size. The world is fundamentally made of ecosystems, not discrete things. These ecosystems are nested inside each other. It's ecosystems all the way down. Every identifiable thing is an ecosystem: a person, an apple, a business, a society, everything. This is the paradigm shift that will unlock solutions to our greatest challenges and give us access to massively transformative opportunities we've barely imagined until now. This is the ecosystem paradigm. And this is what will make the metaverse work for all life, for our thriving, abundant future. Thank you.